Hey all, it's Gary here from Coffee Fusion, and today I thought I'd talk a little bit about puck preparation and why it's the hot topic in espresso over the last few years. So let's dive in and have a little bit of a chat about puck prep whilst you watch my current routine for preparing espresso at home. To put simply, puck preparation encompasses all the steps that go into creating your dosed espresso puck in your portafilter. Now traditionally this would have meant grinding the coffee into the portafilter, perhaps settling the grinds and then tamping. However, in the last few years, espresso enthusiasts, especially at home, have added more and more steps in order to try and get a uniform puck. And because of this, companies are coming out with more and more tools to try and help make this task easier. So why is it that we're taking these extra steps? Basically, what you're trying to achieve with puck prep is a nice even puck that is both tamped nice and level, but also has even density throughout the puck. Now, if you can do this, it's much more likely that water running through your puck will do so evenly. As the water is under pressure, it will try and find a path of least resistance through the puck. Now, if a majority of the water runs through a small part of the puck, it's called channeling. This section of the puck will be over-extracted, whilst the rest of the puck will be under-extracted. This leads to a shot that will be both sour and bitter. So let's talk through this step-by-step method I've used here. Firstly, I'm single dosing my beans. Now this works best if your grinder is specifically designed for single dosing. I'm using an EK43 here, which is a high-end commercial deli grinder, but it was discovered it was great for espresso and has been heavily featured in the WBC since. There are actually many home grinders at a range of budgets these days designed for single dosing. It keeps your coffee beans much more fresh as they're not exposed to oxygen as they would be in a hopper. You just keep them in a sealed bag and you only weigh out what you're going to use. Next here I'm doing some RDT, which is basically adding a very minimal amount of water to the beans so that there's less static after grinding. This helps reduce grind retention in the grinder, but also makes grinds easier to work with post-grinding. I'm grinding the coffee into a dosing cup. This one is specifically sized for a 58mm basket and also allows all the coffee to come out without getting stuck in the container. I then give it a subtle shake whilst trying to keep the portafilter level so that I don't have any mountains of coffee to try and even out afterwards. Now the next step is probably the one that has seen the biggest development of tools in the last few years, which is distribution. Here I'm using a WDT tool, which is basically a few very thin acupuncture needles designed to break up the coffee and even out the density in the whole puck. The WDT tool has become more popular because it gives you the opportunity to distribute the whole puck, unlike some other distribution tools which just level out the top. You can see that I'm also using a dosing funnel, which just helps to make sure no coffee falls out whilst doing this WDT. That's because we previously weighed out our dose, so we want to try and make sure all the coffee stays in the basket. After this, I tend to give a gentle tap on the tamp mat just to condense the ground slightly before pulling out the funnel and moving on to tamping. The only reason I'm doing this is to make it easier to tamp without losing any grounds. Then we're on to tamping and finally extraction. To tamp nice and level, make sure you use your thumb and index finger around the side of the tamper to make sure things feel nice and even. As you go to tamp, just remember to keep your elbow up over the top of the tamper so you can push down nice and straight. In terms of tamp pressure, just keep pushing until you feel the coffee is no longer collapsing into the puck. There's no need to push any harder than this. Lastly, I'm just putting a little puck screen on top. This also helps to evenly distribute the water as it's going onto the puck. It also keeps things nice and clean. Now all of these steps are obviously fine for a home enthusiast, but probably not going to make it into your routine as a cafe barista. So if you can get great quality coffee at a cafe, are all these extra steps really necessary? I think the biggest difference at cafes is the quality and cost of the grinder that they're using. Quite often these grinders are a few $1,000s and produce high quality, fluffy grounds distributed fairly evenly into the portafilter. Because of this, the barista can do a fairly simple palm tap and tamp and end up with an even extraction a majority of the time. All of the additional steps introduced by home baristas have been in an effort to improve quality and distribution of the grinds on their equipment. If you've got high level equipment at home, this probably means you can take your extractions to the next level by adding in these steps. Or if you've got cheaper gear, this means you might be able to adjust your workflow with a few additional steps in order to make the most of the gear you have. Alright guys, so now I want to know, which of these steps do you take when you prepare your espresso? Have you got the full range of puck prep tools that I've shown here? Or are you happy just grinding the coffee into the portafilter and tamping? Let me know. One thing's for certain, this is the step of espresso extraction a lot of home baristas have been focused on improving over the last few years. There's a number of tools already on the market and due to be released in the next year that will try and make high level puck preparation easier and more consistent. I just think it'll be interesting to see whether my routine is the same in a year's time. Keep frothing!